My iPad is correct this time. I'm not going to end us now. It's 2:29. We'll wait till 2:30. Yeah, we got Mr. Bowman. I don't know. Oh, Cindy Hall. Okay, it's 2:30. So we call this February 10th, 2022 meeting of the AMATS Technical Advisory Committee to order. It's 2:30 p.m. Aaron, will you do the roll call?
Of course. Jamie Acton. Okay. Craig Lyon.
Here.
Luke Boland.
Here.
Cindy Heil.
Present.
Matt Stitchick.
Here.
Todd Van Hoog.
Present.
Brian Lindemuth.
Present.
Steve Rebuffo.
Here.
Thank you. Brad Coy.
Here.
Thank you. Shannon Kilcoyne is out, but I'll look. I don't see her on there. Don't see her, so she's out. Ken Colhayes.
Here.
Thank you. You do have a quorum.
Okay, that is great. Aaron, would you also please do the public involvement announcement?
Of course. AMATS committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are first presented by staff or consultants. After the committee discusses the business item, the public is invited to formally comment. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic. And just as a heads up, staff will time everyone and have a nice loud beat.
Sounds good. Thank you for that. And the next item is approving the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Mr. Lyon. Second?
Matt Stitchick. Okay.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Citrick. Do we have any changes to the minutes or to the agenda? Are there any objections to approving the agenda? Okay, that sounds like there's no objections, so agenda is approved. And moving on to the next item, the meeting minutes for January 13, 2022. Do we have a motion for approving the minutes from last meeting?
So moved.
Moved again by Mr. Lyon.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Rebuffo. Do we have any changes to the minutes? If you're not hearing any changes, do we have any objections to approving the minutes? Okay, with no objections, the January 13th, 2022 minutes are approved. Okay, moving right to the meat. Looks like we're on action item 5A, tip amendment number 3, air quality conformity determination, release the 30-day public comment period. Aaron, is that one that you will be covering?
Yes, I just want to let you know that Jamie Acton joined at 2:33 p.m.
Okay, perfect. Let the minutes show.
Yes, I will be doing action item 5A. Okay, so the first item before you is the tip amendment number 3, air quality conformity determination. So as you all know, we periodically make changes to the tip. We have 2 different options that we can do, either an avid mod, which is an easier one that just goes through committee approval, or a little more difficult one, which is an amendment. Tends to reflect bigger changes to projects, new projects, deletion of projects, et cetera, and it has to go through a bunch of different processes, including an air quality conformity determination. So that's what's before you today. This determination goes through and looks that future emissions from transportation projects remain under the allowable emissions budget established in the SIP, the statewide or state implementation plan for air quality. Or in case of a limited maintenance plan, have a future project project pollutant design value low enough to be reasonably unlikely to exceed national air quality standards. There's a lot of stuff in this. So the memo kind of outlines what we're talking about here. Basically, we have to show that our amendment is not going to degrade air quality that we have in our area. We have two limited maintenance areas, one for CO in the Anchorage area and one for PM10 in the Eagle River area. The analysis was done by Matt Stichik, and it was determined that the changes in the amendment is consistent with the SIP and that no element will reduce the EO in Anchorage. We did have an interagency consultation team as required. You will note in the memo it says will meet. That's because by the time we posted this, the interagency consultation group had not met. They met yesterday to go over this, and they gave their support for the analysis done as part of this determination and to have it be released for 30-day public comment. Matt Stichik, if you have anything else to add, I'll defer to him if you'd like to add more.
No, that covers it. I was just going to make the same comment that that last paragraph in the memo should be updated to say the interagency team met and supported the adequacy of the conformity determination.
Thank you, Matt. So what's being asked today by staff is to have the TAC recommend that the air quality conformity determination for TIP amendment number 3 be released for a 30-day public comment period and recommend that to the policy committee.
Okay, so we're recommending that the policy committee release it.
Yes, the policy committee will release everything. So.
Perfect. Okay, any questions or comments from the committee? Go ahead, Mr. Van Hook.
Yeah, are the air quality conformity determinations required just for TIP amendments, or are they also for admin mods?
Just TIP amendments.
Okay.
The admin mod is the smaller one, and the TIP amendment's the larger one.
Yeah, TIP amendments tend to be, as I mentioned, if we're adding or deleting a project, we have to update the air quality, or if there is a cost threshold, 50% of the total project cost that is being added or subtracted, taken away from, bumps it from admin to amendment and requires that conformity determination.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments from the committee? And just to clarify, I'll ask the one question that I have. The Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue extension, is that the one part that triggers? It looks like on the air conformity, it mentions that on the...
Yeah, and Matt will have to clarify this. I believe all of them do, but there is a non-exempt project, which is the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. change, makes it to where it has more work that has to be done. Matt, I don't know if you want to clarify or not.
Yes, that is correct. Essentially, some classifications of projects are exempt from a conformity determination, such as studies, roadway rehabilitation or repavements, safety analyses, and if you folks recall, for amendment number 1, we had that situation where we also had one potential project requiring a new conformity determination, and we pulled that out and put it, that was the transportation improvement, or I'm stumbling over the title of that one. But
probably would have been Academy Vanguard Drive, the new project.
Yep, Academy Vanguard Drive traffic improvements. So it's possible for a amendment to not need an air quality conformity, but that's what the interagency consultation team decides, and the adequacy of any demonstration that's required.
Go ahead, Mr. Van Hook.
Yes, is there a list of exempt projects?
There is. So in 40 CFR, here, bear with me a second. The exempt list is in 40 CFR 90.109. Oops, nope, sorry, wrong. That's the conformity requirement. 40 CFR 93.126, Table 2 is the list of exempt projects. I'll tell you what, I'll try to throw a link in the chat real quick here.
Thank you.
Yeah, sounds good. So to clarify, there are a couple of projects that trigger the TIP amendment, but this one project triggers this study that we're looking at.
Correct. The air quality conformity determination itself, yes.
Okay. That is one of the areas that I really appreciate insight on, because I'm not as familiar with that. So thank you so much. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Is there anyone online? I don't see anybody's hand raised, so the public is also invited to comment. Has anyone notified us that they would like to comment? Is there anyone from the public who would like to make a comment? Okay, so moving on. What is the will of the committee?
Move to recommend, this is Cindy Heil, I move to recommend to that the policy committee release for public comment the air quality conformity analysis for the amendment number 3.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mrs. Heil, seconded by Mr. Van Hove. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. Let's move on to action item 5B, TIP amendment number 3, TIP tables, release for 30-day public comment period.
This is me again. So this is the actual TIP changes that we're making that go along with the air quality conformity determination we just discussed. So I was going to do a quick run through of the changes we're making. So table 2, roadway table, we're updating a number of projects here. Spinard Road rehabilitation needs an additional $2 million for design funding in FY22. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue extensions, $2 million in 22 is moving to beyond 22. This is for right-of-way funding. Next, Potter Drive rehabilitation, 1.25 million in 22 is moving to beyond 2022. The project's still moving forward. They're just not at the point where they need the funding yet for that particular phase. And then last one is the Tdm projects. The 4.1 million in there is moving to beyond FY22. We're not at the point to be able to obligate $4 million for a Tdm project. The Tdm study is just now getting close to getting underway. We don't even have a consultant ready yet at this point. So we're not in a position to obligate that funding. Table 4, plans and studies. Just a quick update here. So you may remember with the last admin mod the AMATS approved, we extended 92nd Avenue reconnaissance study termini to include from King Street to C Street. So add a little portion to it. Turns out they need a little more money to be able to incorporate that in. So they need $150,000. So what we're recommending is adding $150,000 to this project in 22 CSRSA funding. So it's our COVID relief funding. This COVID funding is outside of the AMATS allocation, does not impact fiscal constraint, and does not require match. But we still have to show it in our table. So that's why you have it before you today. Table 5, congestion mitigation air quality. To help balance the program, because we had some additional funding available based on the moving out that we did on roadway 2. We're moving, our staff is recommending moving 1.49 million into project CMQ 0005 bus stop and facility improvements, and 3.8 million into CMQ 0007 capital vehicles. So these are both transit-related projects, so we're providing additional funding to transit. And I would say thank you very much to Jamie Acton and her team for being able to help absorb this funding.
Which would otherwise get lost.
Which would otherwise have a very difficult time being obligated. So, you know, in my view, it goes to a very worthwhile cause. So thank you very much. Table 10, transit, we are updating some information. There's a lot here from the railroad. So I didn't want to go into every specific one because it's just a lot, but you can see it before you. I got the information from Brian Lundemood and we're updating it per their request to keep this funding moving forward. So what's being asked is a 30-day public comment period for the amendment number 3 to have the policy committee release it as such, to go along with the air quality conformity determination. I will note that it is also required to go to the assembly, so we will be putting it into the assembly for review during the 30-day public comment period.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron. Any questions or comments from the committee? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, Mr. Young.
Yeah, Wolfgang Young, DOT Regional Group. The TDM study, was that the UMed TDM?
That is correct.
So you pushed that out to 2023?
No, the only thing being pushed out right now is the construction of projects from that TDM study. The TDM study itself has already received funding and we're awaiting approval to bring a consultant on board to do the actual study itself.
Okay, so if the governor's bond package goes through and that project is funded, is your intent to not proceed with that TDM study?
The intent is to continue with the study, I guess, unless the policy committee makes a determination otherwise, but we would need to know that now before we get a consultant on board.
Well, I guess the corollary is we had a Pell plan for the Seward Highway South Bainbridge, but then the governor told us to reconstruct that portion of the highway, so the Pell study became irrelevant at that point, if it should make it into the study. So I don't know if the GEO bond plays out in the vote this fall, and the TDM study, which is supposed to validate something that just got action, I don't know that we would spend money on that.
Technically, if the extension project, the actual roadway construction project gets funding and goes forward, it would not invalidate the TDM study itself. The TDM study is looking at alternative ways to help with congestion in the area, and it can include roadway projects or it can be alternative options. So what's good about the study is it can bring forward other things that can be done in addition to the roadway itself. So I would recommend we continue moving forward with the study because there is value in it. Because it can help with things like maybe we should encourage more van pooling or carpooling in the area, or teleworking or parking pricing or other things like that.
I agree. I believe my understanding is we've done that TDM study already once before, and this is the second go around on that, unless I'm mistaken.
Mr. Lyon?
So we haven't done a TDM study in that area. There was a state capital grant that was for road construction, which is, you know, that went away. But the TDM is something that is kind of in addition, and if I'm not wrong, I believe has the RFP gone out on that?
Well, yeah, we're in negotiations.
Okay, so it's gone out, but we don't have it signed yet. So, but yeah, so there are two different things. And I think Aaron's correct that there is value to a TDM study as a standalone project, whether there's a new facility going through there or not, because it does address other things, parking, all sorts of stuff, transit in there. So I think there's still value to it. Obviously, as Aaron said, it's up to the policy committee if they think it's superfluous, but in my view, I think it's still a good idea whether there's a construction project going through there or not, but it's up to you folks.
What was the dollar value on portion for the seed?
It was 500,000, but with all ICAP and everything, we're at 4 something.
And so the RFP went out, people applied, proposed, and now it's negotiation.
Correct.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Any other comments from the public? What is the will of the committee on this item?
This Todd Van Hove, I move to recommend to the policy committee release of the 19 to 22 TIP Amendment 3 for 30-day public review.
Second?
Second.
We've got a few different seconds, so I'm gonna go with Mr. Lyon. It looks like, so moved by Mr. Van Hove, seconded by Mr. Lyon. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. Moving on to item number 5C, MTP 2050. I'm assuming it's you again.
Yeah, for a little bit of it, thankfully, I will be able to rest here for a second. As project manager for this 2050 MTP update, I want to bring forward some information to the committees. So everyone remember we had our goals and objectives out in December of 2021 for the 2050 MTP. We received 600 comments on the goals and objectives, so staff spent a weekend rushing through those as quickly as we could to get to the point where we're at right now. Those goals and objectives comments did actually yield changes to the goals and objectives, which you can see in our comment response summary that we have posted online, so everyone can see what those changes are. They did bring about some pretty good changes, and those helped to inform where we're at right now, which is the performance measures and criteria development for the MTP. So everyone knows performance measures and criteria help with project selection. They help say, okay, the type of projects that we want to put into the MTP that help meet our goals and objectives have to help align with these goals and objectives, or the criteria, and then the performance measures, and the criteria helps us with the selection process. So this is a pretty important thing, and we are bringing it forward for a 30-day public comment period in March for release. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over now to the consultants to have them kind of walk through it a little more. I will say really quickly, we did have a work session on this. That recording is up for anyone who wants to watch it. So Juan, are you online?
I am.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, everyone. I'm Juan Lee with R&M Consultants. I'm the project manager on the consultant side for the MTP 2050 update. Like Aaron said, this performance measures and prioritization criteria does help with future tasks, which is make recommendations for projects. And we did have a work session in January. I think it was well attended. So if you were there, great. You got a lot of detailed information on it, walking you through the tables. But if you weren't there, Ben Coleman with R&M and Taryn Olson, Yale, are going to give you a high-level planning level overview of it, just to help understand why we did what and where to focus your comment and review on, which is the local performance measures. The federal ones we can't change. And in response to the previous MTP, we are including those local performance measures. So it's a big change from the previous effort. So with that, in the interest of time, I'm going to turn it over to Ben. He's going to share his screen and give you a quick overview of the performance measures and then prioritization criteria. Take it away, Ben.
All right. Hey, everyone. Yep, we're just going to go through a pretty quick recap. I'll jump right in. So based on the goals and objectives and the 2040 MTP comments, we really wanted to make sure we incorporated all of those comments kind of up until now, and then sort of at the later stages as well. There were a lot of really good comments during the goals and objectives saying, hey, we want more detail and we need it to be measurable. The team absolutely agreed, and we think that this is actually the best place to do it in the performance measures, to give it that level of detail. And so the other big piece to keep in mind is we have these white cells right here that are not filled in blue, and then you have blue cells. So The white cells are going to be the measures that are sort of that are federally required, and so those won't be changing, but the blue ones are the local measures. Now, this is the first time, to my knowledge, that AMATS has done something like this, adding on these sort of measures, but looking at best practices for AMATS's specific needs for the and also looking at other MPOs and kind of what they've done, best practices there. We thought there may be some really cool options to add some nuance and better address the goals and objectives that the community has helped set. And so for the first one, looking at maintaining existing infrastructure, the gaps that we identified largely related to increasing infrastructure resiliency to natural hazards. We already have the federal measures already do a good job at looking at pavement preservation, rolling stock, equipment, facilities, that kind of thing. But the question was, what happens if there are other factors that reduce that useful life? And so that's what this is trying to do. For goal 2, again, a lot already covered federally, but based on comments, we added some pieces looking at emergency response times, and then also conflicts between vehicles and other modes. For goal 3, looking at improving mobility options, the 3 big themes that we looked at were 1, incentivizing creative strategies to improve the system without defining what those are, but creating an openness and sort of, tailoring the incentive systems here. And you'll see it again later when we talk about the prioritization criteria, helping shape projects to incorporate that as part of their thinking and early development. And the next one was giving people alternatives to driving and making those alternatives good. And so you see that in 3B with looking at improving pedestrian and bicycle travel, and a few others down the way. A third big theme was meaningfully addressing the transportation and land use connection. Again, a lot of comments from the 2040 plan and previous comments as part of this effort. And we wanted to make sure that that we were incorporating that in a meaningful way. And so you'll actually see this a number of times throughout the table. Projects that have successfully completed context-sensitive solutions. So the community already has a process that addresses the transportation and land use, and not just that, other big pieces such as avoiding impacts to human and natural environment, improving mobility and safety for multimodal transportation, having multiple feedback loops to ensure that the public is involved in a meaningful way throughout. And so this ends up being kind of a catch-all for a lot of goals further down. Next, we have goal 4, which is to support the economy. Some of the big gaps that we saw were, well, what does that look like, and how do we measure whether that's happening? So, looking at things like tourism, general local investment, but also creating a sense of momentum in the places where we would like to see the economy thrive, while at the same time making sure that that fits in the context of all of the other goals that have been set. One thing that's sort of been kept is the truck travel time reliability index. We thought that fit here and support the economy. For goal 5, there's going to be a lot of overlap and a lot of references to other areas, and the reason for this is a lot of, for example, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We do have there are the federal measures here, but we also look at other pieces like reducing non-single occupancy, percent of non-single occupancy vehicle travel. And so the idea is trying to reduce that in a meaningful way, because we know that, one, that's part of increasing mobility options, which you saw in goal 3, but also paying attention to environmental impacts. And then for goal 6, advancing equity, you'll notice here we have using EJ area of 60th or greater percentile. That's environmental justice. That's using EPA's EJ screen tool. This is already used in the TIP, and so it made a lot of sense to carry that over. So you're using the same measure of equity, that sort of over and under measure. And And so, yeah, so the goal here is to, one, be able to measure the disparities in a meaningful way, and then carrying those forward into the prioritization criteria to ensure that projects are being scored based on that, based on the environmental pieces and all of the other objectives. Any questions?
So one question from me on this is, we've got two items, right? We've got the performance measures and the project criteria. Do we want to look at both and then ask questions? Or do we want to ask questions as we go? What do you think, Aaron?
Probably do performance measures and then see if anyone has any burning questions at that point. If not, just move on to the criteria and then we can move on to motions at that point. Kind of go from there. But they are two separate items. You can release them as one or you can release them as two. It's kind of up to you.
Okay. Sounds good. So you've finished going over the performance measures, or do you have more, Ben, on reviewing performance measures?
That's everything that I have. This was just trying to keep it a general recap. And if anyone wanted more detail, I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the committee on the performance measures that we've just looked at? Any public questions or comments? Okay, and there will be time to ask some questions overall on everything after we go through the next point. So let's move on to the project criteria.
All right, sounds good. Let's jump right in. All right, so for the project prioritization criteria, a few big things to keep in mind. First, whenever a project is nominated to go through this as part of the MTP process, you first have to pick which set of columns are you looking at. So there's going to be things that are bike and ped only projects, transit only projects, and then you have complete streets projects. And keep in mind that these can also have bike and ped and transit elements. And so this is going to be kind of the catch-all. The reason these were divided was largely to based on funding considerations, and to also make sure that we're comparing apples to apples. Another thing that we do is we align this according to goals, and so you'll see goal 1, goal 2, and then there'll be specific criteria under each goal, so on and so forth. Each goal is worth, in aggregate, it's going to be the same. So goal 2 is going to be worth 20, goal 1 is worth 20. The idea is to, I guess, not necessarily prioritize one goal over the other. It's meant to sort of eliminate the projects that are always going to be problematic because they go directly against stated goals and objectives, but also give people who are submitting projects, it gives them idea, whether through bonuses, penalties, it gives them ideas for how they can improve a project to take a good project and make it even better in the sense that it more closely aligns with goals and objectives. So that's kind of how the scoring criteria works out. And then ultimately it'll lead to a maximum total of, whoops, that needed to be changed to 120 points. But also keep in mind, here's actually a good example. So the first criteria like improving safety, improving security, some of these may be more or less applicable to different types of projects. And so you'll see something like this where there's plus 20 points versus plus 0 points, as opposed to a complete streets or a quarter project where there may be really applicable measures or descriptions for each one. And so that's just kind of how the points have been distributed now. If anyone has any questions, we can go based on that. Otherwise, it really, it follows the intent is to follow the same 6 goals.
Okay. So that goes through the project criteria. Will your presentation have anything more, or are we now into the question and comment?
So we can either we can jump right into that. There was one other piece. Actually, this is a follow-up from a question you asked previously about how this affects the travel model. I believe you asked whether there was any sort of whether it was like iterative based on new data that comes up. The short answer is that it's iterative in the sense that all of these criteria for the model will be assessed according to the multiple alternatives. But in terms of saying, well, I'm trying to think of an example. So for example, let's say transit efficiency, whatever measures we used, let's say there's a 30% efficiency increase. Will that be reflected in this model? And the answer would be that you would have to update the base year conditions. So that would be, you would see that, but you would see that after a model update.
Okay, and are you referring to the discussion from the work session? Is that?
Yes, yes. But if there's nothing else, yeah, let's do questions.
Okay, any questions or comments from the committee on either the project criteria that we just reviewed or performance measures? Is it all right if I make a few comments? So a few comments as I've been looking through it. One of them is, as you mentioned, the land use plan, or the land use and transportation interaction. One thing that I recall from 2040 land use plan is the concept of transit corridors. And yes, the value of along those transit corridors really emphasizing pedestrian access, transit frequency, not just whether there is a transit route, but if there are high frequency transit routes. And looking through these metrics, I didn't see discussion about transit corridors. And so on a few of them, I would, unless Jamie has other thoughts from the transit side, it seems to me that, for example, on MTP goal number 1, the top criteria of improve existing surface transportation infrastructure, at the very top of the table, or to the right it says project improves the condition of transit supportive infrastructure. Kind of similar to how later in the table, when it's on a freight route, there's extra points. Can some of these that are transit, if they're on a transit corridor, be extra points? Just to emphasize the fact that developing high quality transit on transit corridors has additional benefits versus other parts of the city. I'm kind of curious what. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just saying, so I mean, Jamie or Bart, if you have specific thoughts, jump on in. Otherwise, yeah, I can speak to that as well.
No, I would echo what Brad was saying in the sense of the additional support for the supported corridors, especially the amount of work that's gone into the land use plan map and our short range plan and the way that we have redeveloped our system. I think that would be a nice nod for sure.
Yeah, so there are two ways, at least here, that we could address it. So we can either have, for example, like a +12 +8 +0. So +12 would say it improves the transit supportive infrastructure on, for example, like a transit-oriented development, those corridors identified in the land use plan, or on some sort of transit supportive corridors. And then the other would say it does it, but maybe on like a lower frequency route. Or we could do it as bonus points. So if you have any opinions there, we could definitely do that. So that's if we're just looking at transit projects. If you're looking at, we do have, let's see, further down here, so incorporates the land use context. We do talk about things where improving non-motorized or transit access, where we talk about growth supporting feature overlays. So these are described in the 2040 land use plan specifically. And so that would include that transit supportive development as well. So these are two spots where we get at it. But yeah, I'd love your feedback on how we can better incorporate that information.
Yeah, I like the tiered option that you mentioned. And MTP goal 3 where it has improved transit access and accommodations. If you go to MTP goal 3, down, halfway down the page. Improves transit access and accommodations. If on the complete streets and the pedestrian bicycle projects, I think when it's a transit project, that's good to have a little bit of that tiered, but I think on the streets and others, it's particularly important to have that nod, given that the transit corridors, in my view, should really have great transit facilities. I mean, we can't have phenomenal frequency of transit everywhere in the city. That's just not feasible, but if we can have it on our transit corridors, I see that as being a big benefit. So
Yeah,
so I think
absolutely. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So incorporate that into the higher point criteria.
Yeah, so I guess in the interest of avoiding double counting, so it's like we definitely want to capture that importance. It might make sense to kind of pick and choose. So whether so for the bike and ped and the corridor specifically, maybe we fit something in here as a bonus point, or several bonus points, or when we talk about incorporating land use, this is kind of where it fits a little bit in terms of it improves transit access, directly correlating to a growth supportive feature. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. Let's see.
Question for staff, should we be making like specific, or is that general comment and they can think about how to incorporate it?
It'd be nice if we had more specifics, because I'm a little concerned we're double counting things here for one particular mode over another. I'm supportive of transit, I'm not saying I'm not, but
Right.
It's a little odd that we are adding in here to multiple criteria when we already have it as its own separate criteria later on, that it's supposed to be on these growth supported features, because it's not just the transit corridors that we have to think about, it's also the greenway development corridors, the RFAs, that kind of stuff. And so I'm a little leery about doing it just there. If we want to maybe select one, if it's, the problem is we have this one here, it incorporates land use aspect of it. That already talks about those growth supporting features. So if we add it somewhere else, we're now getting like extra points to that one particular thing. So maybe we can beef this one up to be a little more specific or different and make it stronger, more points, something like that. But I'd rather just keep it here to this one focused. And that keeps it kind of equal for everyone.
Okay, I hadn't noticed that note with that detail in it.
And that might be one of those things, and that's the hard thing, is the growth supported features, there's so many of them that it's hard for us to list them out in the criteria itself. So it kind of sometimes gets overlapped or missed.
But I guess just trying to game it out as well. I guess what are some situations where this would fail to address exactly what you're thinking of? Can you think of maybe an example where this just wouldn't make the cut?
So one of the thoughts that I'm having is if there's a transit project proposed on a transit corridor versus on a parallel route that's not identified as the transit corridor, is there a way, will this sufficiently show that? Will there be a clear way that says, hey, this is on a transit supported corridor? With it being just growth supported feature overlay, maybe there's other overlays that one of them accounts for, but not transit. So at least having one spot where it's clearly identified, hey, this is on a transit corridor. Not trying to double count too much, but if there is just maybe one other place, maybe on the goal 3 one, where it's, instead of trying to do the first one that I mentioned, but just that goal 3 one having extra points for it being on a transit supported corridor, so that at least in doing the scoring, it's identified and brought up and mentioned.
Okay, I think that's something we can look at. just as a reminder, you will see these all again. This is not final approval. This is just going out for public release. So even during that 30-day public comment period, we can all get together and have discussions about comments or questions that we have. So you will see it again.
Yeah, but we'll definitely make a note in the meantime. You won't see it here on screen, but it's happening behind the scenes. Yeah, we'll make a note here. So these, if we do add that here, these will be infrastructure improvements that are transit supportive as opposed to a transit project one. Actually, no, I take that back. Never mind. I'm just trying to think of how it plays out differently based on the corridor project as opposed to a transit specific project.
Yeah, this is one where we might need a little more thought put into it before we necessarily make the change, just because we want to make sure it works. So if this is a change that you guys want, you can recommend to add it in there to either look at during the 30-day public comment period or add it in before the public comment period happens, however you want to do it. But we'll probably need a little more time to look at it.
Sounds good. Any thoughts on the community on that? How to do that? Okay, so one of the other items that I wanted to also make a comment on is the goal 4, support the economy, supports major employment and commercial areas. One idea that I have on this one is to focus more on sense of place and less on just throughput. So providing a little bit of clarity. For example, like as it looks on that first 5 points where it says project enhances bicycle pedestrian transit access.
Mm-hmm.
The thought that I have is to adjust it to say project enhances bicycle pedestrian transit connections to adjacent land uses within a major employment or commercial area, focused more on whether, say, this certain development area is pedestrian friendly, people want to stay there, they can walk from their office across the street to grab lunch, and it has the amenities that are accommodating to those traveling by other modes, staying within a major employment commercial area, not just access to, which kind of has the feel of more having a bike route to the location, if that makes sense.
So moving to there and moving within there.
Right.
Okay.
Maybe that's just it. Maybe we say access to a movement within. Yeah, it could be a very simple way of getting that point across. Okay.
That's a good thought.
It's a little bit different way of thinking about our transportation network that I feel would be beneficial here in Anchorage on projects to be thinking about movement within.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the last one that I want to make a comment on is at the end for the mobility benefits for EJ populations, goal 6, where it talks about improving mobility. One idea that I like is thinking more about accessibility to desired destinations. Often when you think of mobility, you think of delay, transportation delay, movement of vehicles, and can we, with some metrics, look at land use, kind of a little bit more interplay with the land use and see, where the desired designations, is this improving mobility to those destinations, not just mobility overall, but thinking more about destinations in that metric.
Yeah, I think that would actually be easy enough to adapt. We could split this into 2. So there's, we could keep some sort of the general mobility and then have something else where it talks about, because we're already talking about major employment destinations connectivity too. And so I think it would be easy enough to add that nuance either as a separate criteria or work that into here as well.
So those are my comments. I'm open to other committee thoughts if you don't think those are good ideas. I'm totally open to that. So. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Any questions or comments from the public? Do you see any online, Christine? Okay. So, given the things that we've talked about, as we make motions, do we need to specifically call it anything that I've changed to see what people think about those, or?
Yeah, I would recommend you have two things here. Sorry to be complicated, but one on the performance measures themselves, and then one on the criteria, because it looks like you have some recommended changes for the criteria. So if you can do a motion on the performance measures and finish that, and then do a separate motion on the criteria and add any edits that you guys would like to see.
Yeah, I might I think I need to chew on these for a little bit to know for sure. And since we have a 30-day public comment thing, I guess I don't quite yet fully understand what we're doing. Once I see it written out, I mean, I guess we're not going to adopt them for 30 days either way, but I just don't know exactly what they're doing. I want to think about it a little bit, but I guess I'm fine if we want to send them out like this and then we can look at it for 30 days and decide whether it makes sense to adopt them. I just don't know the exact ramifications of what we're doing yet, so.
So would that work for staff to, the things that I've said, you can be thinking about it, looking at it, it gets incorporated as part of the public comment, but doesn't get adjusted at this moment?
That'd probably be easier for us because staff will need to go back and look over and make sure we've captured everything as well. And so, yeah, it'd be easier for us to look at it during the public comment period.
Okay. I view my comments as nuanced enough that it's, whether they're in this one that goes to the public versus what adopted, I think it's not going to change the flavor of everything. So I'm supportive of that. Okay, what is the will of the committee on the performance measures table?
I'll move that we recommend to the policy committee to release the performance measures for a 30-day public comment period.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Lyon, seconded by Mr. Rampo. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. Now, what is the will of the committee on the project criteria? Not everyone at once.
I will move to recommend to the policy committee a release of the project criteria for a 30-day public comment period.
This is Matt Stichik, all second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Lyon, seconded by Mr. Stichik. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron, and thank you, team, for your presentation and all your work. Okay, moving on to action item 5D, Northern Lights Sidewalk Project.
Yes, I'll do a quick little bit, and then there might be some people here from DOT who will speak up about it.
Right.
I see an army ready to go, so I'll hurry through as much as I can. So, as everyone kind of knows, we have a pavement pot of funding for roadways in the TIP. So it's pavement preservation. We recently, with this new TIP, the 2019 to 2022 TIP, have successfully implemented a pathway and trails pavement replacement pot of funding, because it was recognized that our pathways and trails have a lot of needs as well. And so we wanted to have a separate pot for them. One project came out of there, and it's the Northern Lights Boulevard, Minnesota Drive to Seward Highway sidewalk repairs. I know you guys have had a briefing on this previously where the project team came forward and said that more funding is needed to help do everything. So DOT provided a memo that outlines all of the improvements as well as the cost of those improvements. And so staff is coming before you today with the recommendation that this project be pulled out of the pavement replacement, the sidewalk and trails, or pathway and trails pavement replacement pot of funding, and put in as a separate project in the upcoming 23 through 26 TIP. So it'd be identified as its own project with its own scope, own project number, et cetera, its own line item in the TIP. Staff feels that this is needed to help fully fund this project to the amount that's shown in the DOT memo. I guess I'll turn it over to DOT if they have anything else to add.
Sure. Sean Baskey, previously the project manager on the Northern Lights Pavement Preservation or Sidewalk Repair Project. So yeah, just like Aaron said, we came in front of you guys in November, kind of shared the overall goals, and really we're just looking for, guidance on what the committee supports moving forward on the project. They're fully funding or leaving it under its current funding.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee?
My only comment is that this is a good example of what oftentimes happens in these pavement replacement ones. We get scope creep. And so this is a great way to not have scope creep, to have move it over into a separate standalone project and do it correctly as a full project there. So I'm very supportive of this. I think it's a great project. It's a great way to enhance the pavement. I mean, the non-motorized facilities in that corridor, which are obviously, it's a huge need. So I think it's a great solution here. I'm very supportive.
Thanks for your comments, Craig. Any other questions or comments from the committee? One question that I have is it going to be scored with all the other TIP projects? So this looks like it's the upcoming TIP, right?
Technically speaking, no, because it's already received funding, so it'll be grandfathered in. Grandfathered does not guarantee it'll be in there. It's our recommendation that'll come forward to the policy committee that it be included and doesn't need to be scored. So that's what I recommend we do with this, is add it into the next one without having to score.
And then they'll see how it fits within all the budget and where the funds are not going instead and kind of those questions?
Correct, yes. They can see kind of what funding we have available after all the grandfathered projects, and they can see, okay, does that match up to what they want?
Sounds good. And thinking about Northern Lights and the MTP, and I recall hearing, maybe there might be changes to or projects that could do things to Northern Lights, removing a lane, bike lanes, kind of anything along that line. How might that interplay with this sort of project? Because this is just sidewalks, right? And you leave the curbs where they're at, and all of those pieces.
Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not going to be widening sidewalks. It's going to be making ADA improvements where needed. It's going to be helping with moving or undergrounding utilities, kind of whatever is decided there. Maybe you can speak on what the project's going to do.
Yeah, sure. So the project basically takes the existing sidewalk width and makes it ADA compliant, like you said. So, where there's cracks, rework, the pavement in any of those sections. One of the major things we talked about last time was nearly all of the driveways, are not ADA compliant. They're fully pitched from, full curb height down to no curb height along the width of, one sidewalk width. And so, none of that is ADA compliant. So reworking that, you'd have to go back onto every single private property to rework driveway grades and things like that. Most of the curb ramps at each of the signalized intersections are good because we went through with the Pavement Preservation Project a number of years ago, reworked all of that. Utilities are in the way, so we've got, overhead poles and things. We've got junction boxes that are in the middle of the pathway that are, don't meet ADA compliance too big of cracks, too high of lips, all kinds of things like that.
So maybe a related question is, if in the MTP we identify projects that make some changes to where the curbs might be on other things, would having this project that's not changing curbs do those changes? Could they interplay all right?
No, I mean, these are very specific projects of what we can and can't do, what we can and can't do. It's, as Craig kind of talked about, scope creep. If you sit there and start being like, okay, we want to move things from this location to a new one, well, what does that mean for right-of-way impacts and other things like that? We do have projects in the MTP that are making recommended changes to Northern Lights Boulevard. That really is a separate project. This is a very specific and much-needed improvement for the non-motorized facilities. It does not preclude future projects from coming along. And I would hate to see these improvements delayed or not done just for the possible future project that could be done.
Yeah,
I think this can be done and future projects can also be done.
That's more, I guess my question was, is it precluding some of those future things being able to be?
No, and you know, honestly, it takes a long time to get projects moving forward. So while this is done and provides benefit for everyone for all that time, that another project could be coming along, because that new one could take 10, 20 years. Like we really need the improvements now.
This
So-
gets it done now, okay, perfect, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Or from the public? Okay, what is the will of the committee?
I move to recommend to the policy committee that this project be considered as a standalone project in the non-motorized and fully funded non-motorized project in table 3 of the 2023 to 2026 tip.
Second, Colhase.
Okay, moved by Mr. Van Hove, seconded by Mr. Colhase. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the project and plan updates. We have one, item 6A, highway safety corridors within an urban environment. Looks like we've got DOT presenting.
Yes, so really quickly, Scott Thomas will be presenting on this, and just so you know, this came about because the policy committee was talking about this very topic at their last meeting and had asked somebody to come forward and provide a presentation. So I said, let's have somebody at the TAC as well, because it's good information for everyone. So Scott has very generously donated his time to come talk about it. So Scott, whenever you're ready, thank you.
Okay, thank you for having the question. Let me share screen if I can. These are the slides. I will try to be brief, as this will take about 10 minutes. I'm sorry, I need to share. Here we go. And screen showing okay?
Yes.
Okay. So as Aaron said, AMATS has asked for some follow-up information. We last met in December 2020. And we talked about Tudor Road quite a bit, and Tudor Road in a high crash area, but we're really talking about all typical arterials that people have to go across. And I won't go through this whole slide, just if you may remember in our last discussion, there were like 10 things we could do, and number 8 on the list was urban safety corridors. So that's what we'll talk about today. And recently, last week, I saw that the Assembly resolution, it's just AR, not ARR, was to consider a way to identify road safety corridors in an urban environment. And I noticed that it mentions funding to grant data collection and enforcement at the municipal level with the police department. And I want to show you how that might relate to state statutes and state efforts, and what the next steps might be. So if I show you all that, is that on target for the topic today?
Yes, thank you, Scott.
Okay, let's go to, and if is this slide big enough? It's okay, I can go to share or slides or. Let's try.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so I first want you to know the general process for safety corridors as it stands today. It all starts thanks to enabling legislation, and I'm going to show you how maybe city code also. State legislation is what started it, thanks to written laws. And then what happens after it's been authorized to do such a thing, the agency's staff goes to work on a study, finds candidates, and then the agency, once candidates are found, there's a thing that we've called implementation plans that target education, enforcement, and engineering, and even work with EMS. We have to have an action plan, not just call it a corridor. And then because this is an important thing, staff doesn't make the final decision. There's a thing we call designation that happens at the executive level. Right now at the state level, the DOT commissioner and DPS commissioner. So you want to, as we go through these examples here, you'll want to think, how does this happen at the city level? Whoops, sorry, here we go. I have gone back a slide. There we go. There we go. And then before you get into how they're designated, the key is once they're designated, there's got to be ongoing action. It's double fines, and there's grants to make things happen, and there's interim actions to incrementally get people to have less conflict, less crashes, and so all these efforts, engineering, education, enforcement, are trying to make lasting changes, and then and you're trying to find a way to make it permanent, not just interim, and that sometimes means projects and other changes. And then the final goal is to decommission them. If we've succeeded, we can move on to the next road of need. So real quick, great to designate them. It works. It's only been done on rural highways, high-speed highways, and these are all four designated corridors in South Central Alaska. Red is fatalities, fatal crashes, and blue is hospitalization. About 2009 or 2006, they were designated into 2009, and then the policing efforts really picked up in 2009. And there is a decrease of about a third, up to 40% combined. But in some corridors like the Seward Highway, it's not as good. We're down, fatal crashes haven't dropped at all, and down by less. When we talk about lasting and permanent solutions, DOT out in the Mat-Su on 2 corridors and down on the Kenai on 1 corridor, we're building 3-lane divided highways and working on side streets and connections and making it kind of permanent safety changes. The Seward Highway is still under consideration of what else we can do. So how do you find candidates real quick? In Anchorage, just 2 slides on candidates is we already know a lot. AMATS through the non-motorized plan, through the Highway Safety Improvement Program. A lot of fatal and serious crashes are non-motorized users, but it's really about all users. So there's a screening program against all serious crashes. But just to give you an example, some of the same corridors pop up in the non-motorized plan. And I wanted to tell you, since our January 2020 meeting, we were talking about making sure the non-motorized plan aligned with safety needs at the federal and state level. And I believe it now does. The final version tackles the same priority high crash corridors. There's more needs than we have funding. We're going to have to look at how we can fix just a list of roads in the bottom right that are pretty common themes every time we study the data. Another thing that's going on that we'll be working with Brad Coy at the City Traffic Engineering Office is we're looking at materials in general. They're considered the corridors of concern. And by statute, people ask us about the speeding, speed limit, and by statute and engineering manuals, we're supposed to look at many factors, not just radar. And so we do. It takes a lot of work to document adjacent land use density, conflicting traffic, pedestrian and bike use, and the vehicles, and decide where the highest risk area is from that front, not just crashes. And once again, in the top of this photo it's Muldoon and Tudor and Lake Otis that we've seen some arterial problems. We also know Seward. You guys talked about Seward and Northern Lights and Midtown Minnesota. I just want you to know that recently, I'm showing Tudor is a real hot spot that we all know about, from Lake Otis east to Elmore. Muldoon has been, and we've had several projects to chip away at that. Just had meetings last week with the Scenic Foothills Community Council, and there's been since 2019, fatal crashes, and they're very concerned about it. The AMATS, or I say AMATS, the Assembly Resolution on Safety Corridors talks about could Tudor be one. And right now we've said that we will tackle things through the Highway Safety Improvement Program process also. So let's get to the safety corridor rules though. It's already authorized, I will say, in state statute. This statute that you can walk away with this slide says the Department of Transportation may designate a portion of a highway based on, and I've highlighted in red, based on data and other reports, based on a screening. And then the commissioners of DOT and DPS will consult with the local government and designate one. So the questions on this current statute says, this is enabling legislation. We can do it. We can even do it now in Anchorage under this statute. It doesn't say Anchorage is excluded, but it does say it's under the authority of DOT and DPS. So I put a question mark on that. Does that mean we can do city roads? I'm not sure. Does that mean the city has authority? I think through the DOT and DPS. The second half of this statute says that fines are implemented, double fines, and they create grants and they come back into safety. It's not just to generate revenue, it's to come back and fix problems in the safety corridors. And that's what's happened in the past. How does that work in Anchorage if APD is the law enforcement agency? A question to be determined. So as I get to next steps at the very end for AMATS or the assembly is decide if state statute is a model and decide if city code is clear enough. It has already been updated to, as you can see in the middle of my screen, to define that traffic safety corridors exist. The way we word the signs as safety zone means that there's an overlap with the municipal and state term or definition of a safety zone for pedestrians. Safety zones as it currently stands are exclusive areas for pedestrians and not vehicles. It may take some updates to show that, to reflect that safety zones are also safety corridors where there are vehicles and there's conflicts. And you can see on the bottom of the screen that the municipal code recognizes fines for safety corridors. What I think is unclear at the municipal level is who collects the fines, where do they go, do they come back in grants, are city roads eligible? These are things that I think enabling legislation would clear up, especially if you go back and look at state statute and then see if you want to do any clarifications. I'll be really, I have only 3 slides to go, and I'll show you that once there's enabling legislation, there is technical criteria. The screening, the candidates I was showing you examples of. The Alaska Traffic Manual is adopted by statute for traffic control devices, and it governs the cities, the states, and the boroughs. So we're all under the same criteria. And it's a screenshot. I apologize for the text, but the key is the current technical criteria that comes from statute has gone further to currently restrict our use to rural highways, high-speed highways, no more than 10 safety corridors, and they should be 5 miles long. This would have to be updated to work in Anchorage. So this can be done. It's a technical manual. It goes through the Federal Highway Administration for adoption. The cities and boroughs can be a part of revising this language, and then it has to be adopted. It's already a manual that's authorized by statute. So this is another factor. 2 slides. Why not just? I think there's a misunderstanding that if we do make a safety corridor in the city or outside the city on a rural highway, doesn't it lower the speed limit? And not typically. It hasn't been done on the rural highways. It isn't done usually in other states that have safety corridors. There's only a handful. the key is to have all these interim action items, not just change the numbers on the signs. There's a do decide that the numbers should change. You have to remember that you have to get the driver's attention in a lot of other ways. If most drivers are driving are good drivers and not reckless, they're on most of the urban roads, they're driving over 40 mile an hour, in some 43 to 50, 54. If you do change the rules, do you ticket them all? Is that effective? Or do you go after the worst? And the reason I want to mention first is that if you take most of our arterials at 20,000 cars and up, in every sample, there's up to 4% of those drivers who don't care. And they're over 10 miles an hour over there. That could be on a busy road up to 50 cars an hour. So there's an area worth targeting that isn't the same as everybody, ticketing everybody. Just want you to know that speed limit reductions are not really done. So I'll close with this slide so we can go to questions. Is if there are to be urban safety corridors, what would the next steps be? There's a resolution asking for funding to study and screen. There's a state statute already allows it, but what's still the obstacles? And I would say that it would be worth taking a look at municipal code to see if it's clear enough under items 1 and 2 versus the state statute and safety zones for pedestrians versus safety corridors with pedestrians. I think it would be good to clear up that language. That would give all agencies a clear picture of where we're going. Then I would do with at the same time, it can be parallel or after any kind of rule writing. I would look at our technical manual, the Alaska Traffic Manual, and go to federal highways and delete rural and address length and make urban possible. That hasn't been done yet. Then with all that in place, then you're off and running under items 4 through 9. You can screen for candidates, city traffic with data, working with city police. Under the current rulemaking, that would have to go through the DOT and DPS for actual designation. Nobody gets to designate on the state safety corridors today without coming up with an action plan, or item 5, an implementation plan for management to make sure the resources are there and the funding's there to do something different. Then if it's all designated under item 7, you have to implement those action plans for real, not just on paper, and then every year come back and check off that they're working. And so do some kind of audit, and we try to do that every year. We're a little behind, but we're checking on that now. And then the reason I list you the last 2 steps is that all sounds good, but after a decade, it starts to people forget. And one of the goals that the DOT has is to find permanent, lasting solutions to our safety corridors, so that number 9, they can be decommissioned. And with that, Aaron, I want to turn it back over to you and Brad, and see if you want to go back on any slides or any questions.
Any questions from the committee?
Brad, this is Kent. A question, or maybe more of a comment. Scott, I was generally aware of the Assembly's interest in this, and I'm not aware, and I don't know if the administration has even considered it. So it'd be good for perhaps Brad and I and maybe others to just raise this with Lance Wilbur, the Director of Public Works, and others, before we get too much momentum behind it, to make sure that we've got interest and support in doing something.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because under next steps, under the last slide, I don't think that us as technical staff have really the tools to go forward making technical changes without basically local consultation, municipal support.
Is your PowerPoint here, is it something you could share with us?
Yes.
I wouldn't mind having a copy of that. That'd be great. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Really good information.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? And thank you, Scott, for presenting and sharing it. Definitely helpful and timely. I was impressed with how quickly got on the agenda, so thank you.
Thank you. And we are scheduled to meet with you, Brad, to go over the speed findings, this slide, slide 6 here, how the arterials are doing, whether they're safety corridors or not, how are they doing, and where do we see some opportunities? And we'll come see you in March to see what we can do. And I will send these updated slides to Aaron so that you can circulate them and use them as public information.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and send these out to the TAC and policy committee members. We will have Scott come to the policy committee meeting if he's available to do a quick little presentation on this. So we'll see it all again. So.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Any questions from the public? Any other questions online? I did see that there were some questions or comments online. Do I need to read those, or is it fine for the record that they're just in the chat?
We can go ahead and read them. If you want to go ahead and read them, we can respond.
Okay. John Littleton asked if the hillside is rural. Jonathan Cecil, one of the AMATS staff members, said yes, according to the hillside plan. And then John Littleton asked for a presentation to be emailed to him. So as Scott emails it to us, we can either forward it to John or Scott can forward it to him.
Yeah, I'll send it out to everyone after the meeting once I get the final version.
Perfect.
Can I chime in, Brad Weddleton?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, thoughts on this. I think this came up. A number of us were curious about it, but particularly, I think Forrest Dunbar looking at that, stretch of Tudor, around the Muldoon curve and so on. So, this could be presented as very brief and as good at the policy committee, but I almost think it's most effective to target the interested people is to maybe have an assembly work session or combine it with some committee to cover this. And then Kent, I think your point is then you could be there to hear what assembly members are thinking about this and then maybe respond. It just, this may or may not work. Maybe there's components and maybe we just decide not to go forward. But it would probably be more an effective meeting, if we had assembly members that were asking about this along with, Lance Wilbur and Kent and so on. I don't even know that we need this at the policy committee. But I guess I'm pointing at Scott, will you do it? And Kent, does that make sense instead of just having an administration meeting on it?
Is this something that we should coordinate with offline?
Yeah, we can coordinate offline.
Okay.
We'll still have it at the PC as just a quick run through for those who aren't
Sure.
here. And then the other side of things we can work offline.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can follow up with you, John.
I was just gonna, this is Kent, I was just say good comments, John, and I will, when we're done here this afternoon, I'll talk with Lance about that idea.
Okay, I'll be at my desk too. You could call if you wanted.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the comments, John. The ideas, appreciate it. Okay. Moving on then to the next item on our agenda is the general information. Do we have any general information items? Doesn't show up on the agenda, so.
Not from us.
Okay, next on to the committee comments. The floor is now open for any comments from the committee. Yeah.
So it'll wait.
Anyone online that would like to comment? Any committee members? Okay. Are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment? Do we have anyone that you see online, Christine? No. Okay. I guess that means we're ready to adjourn. Thank you for your participation. The meeting is adjourned at, get this time right this time, 3:53.